Have you ever heard a secret so terrifying it could only be whispered in numbers? This is the story of Myra, a little girl who appeared out of nowhere one rainy Tuesday morning, sitting on the steps of the old town hall. She looked about 6 years old, with wide, dark eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world. But when anyone tried to speak to her, she would only respond with a string of numbers, soft and rhythmic, like a broken lullaby. At first, people thought she was lost, maybe traumatized. The local sheriff, a kind man named Officer Davies, took her to the station. He offered her a juice box and a teddy bear. He asked her name, where her parents were. She just looked at him and said, 47, 19, 8. Davies wrote it down, thinking it was a code, a street address maybe. He searched for every combination he could think of, but it led nowhere. The numbers were meaningless. Or so he thought. 3 days later, a fire broke out at the old textile mill on the edge of town. It was a massive blaze. 47 people were inside for a company retreat. 19 of them were hospitalized. 8 of them never made it out. 47, 19, 8. A cold dread washed over Officer Davies. It couldn't be a coincidence. He looked at the little girl, now sleeping soundly in a temporary foster home, and a shiver ran down his spine. Myra was placed with the Hendersons, a warm couple who had fostered children for years. They tried their best to make her feel at home. They read her stories, drew pictures with her, and talked to her constantly, hoping to coax a real word out of her. But all she offered were her numbers. 112, 44, 1. Mrs. Henderson would write them down in a little notebook, hoping they might one day make sense. A week later, a multi-car pileup on Highway 112 during a sudden blizzard made national news. 44 vehicles were involved. There was only one fatality. A wave of fear rippled through the Henderson household. It was happening again. The numbers weren't random. They were prophecies. They were death tolls. The town started to change. Whispers followed Myra wherever she went. Children were pulled away from her at the park. The Hendersons found their windows egged and their tires slashed. Fear, as it often does, had turned into anger. People called her a witch, a harbinger of doom. They didn't see a scared little girl. They saw a monster. Disturbed by the escalating situation, authorities brought in Dr. Ari Thorne, a renowned child psychologist specializing in selective mutism. He was a man of science, a skeptic. He believed there was a rational explanation for everything. He spent weeks with Myra using every technique he knew. Play therapy, art therapy, gentle questioning. He found her to be intelligent, observant, but her only form of communication remained the cold, hard numbers. One afternoon, Dr. Thorne was reviewing his session notes. He had recorded all of Myra's numerical sequences. He noticed they weren't just about local events anymore. 816.72. A few days later, a passenger plane, Flight 816, crashed in the Andes. There were only 7 survivors from the initial impact, and only 2 were rescued alive. Thorne's hands trembled as he connected the dots. Her gift, if you could call it that, wasn't limited by geography. He started feeding her numbers himself, testing a horrifying hypothesis. He'd show her a picture of a crowded stadium and ask her, how many? She would just stare at him with those ancient eyes. But later that night, she'd whisper a new sequence to Mrs. Henderson. The numbers always corresponded to a future tragedy. It was as if she was a receiver for the world's coming pain, a living, breathing antenna for disaster. Dr. Thorne decided to dig into Myra's past, but there was nothing to find. No birth certificate, no dental records, no missing child report matched her description. Her fingerprints weren't in any database. It was as if she had simply materialized on the steps of the town hall. He ran a DNA test, a long shot, but he was desperate. The results that came back were impossible. The lab called him, their voices a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Myra's genetic markers were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Certain sequences in her DNA were advanced, evolved. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Based on her cellular degradation, or rather the lack of it, the lab's computers estimated her birth year. The printout read 2031. It was currently 2026. Myra wasn't from a different place. She was from a different time. This revelation shattered everything Dr. Thorne thought he knew about reality. Was she a refugee from a dystopian future? Was she sent back for a reason? He looked at Myra, no longer seeing a child, but an enigma wrapped in a temporal paradox. The numbers weren't just predictions. They were memories. Things that, for her, had already happened. He tried to ask her about the future, about 2031, but she just grew quiet, her numerical whispers becoming less frequent. It was as if talking to him, sharing her burden, was causing her to fade. Her presence in their timeline was a glitch, an error that the universe was slowly trying to correct. One morning, Mrs. Henderson went to wake Myra for breakfast. The bed was empty. The window was closed and locked from the inside. Myra was simply gone. The only thing she left behind was a single piece of paper on her bedside table. On it, written in a child's shaky handwriting, was one final sequence of numbers. The numbers were long, a complex series that nobody could decipher. They didn't correspond to any known disaster. Dr. Thorne kept the paper, studying it for the rest of his life, convinced it was the key to understanding who Myra was and where she came from. The town slowly forgot the little girl who spoke in numbers, dismissing her as a strange chapter in their local history. But some say, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. A soft, rhythmic whisper carried on the breeze. A string of numbers, a warning, a memory, an echo from a future that has already happened. What do you think the final numbers meant? A warning for our time? Or perhaps just a forwarding address? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed diving into the unknown, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay curious.